For 40 years of creating art, I will talk about the different eras of my artistic development. And the first one is early in life before Kellogg Community College. So we were busy parents raising 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. And so my art went in the area of a lot of sewing. I love textiles. I still love the feel of beautiful fabrics. And so the children had a lot of handmade garments, but also I would go to Lakeview Adult Ed one night a week to paint, usually with oils at that point. And the Art Center also had a wonderful teacher, Darlene Krimmel, who since has moved to Colorado. So I took her classes. So that was the way I developed before KCC. So one of the paintings I chose to discuss that was done early in my artistic development was this painting of a child on a swing. Often in that early era, I didn't use my own photographs. I used painting thoughts from magazines. So this is one of my early paintings in oils. We were fortunate enough, however, to have a trip to London at that time, and they have a unique place there called Speaker's Corner, where people can get on a pedestal and say anything they want, talking about religion, talking about politics, or whatever. And I loved these photos, especially of this one in which he's buttonholing this other elderly gentleman and giving him a piece of his mind. Since I loved painting, I felt my concentration in art would be in painting. I went to KCC as a part-time student for several years and loved palms early in life. There are many palm paintings in this show that you'll see. I continue to love them throughout my life and still do like them. This painting won first prize in paintings at the KCC annual student show. I also received first prize in photography at KCC for this painting, which was taken on a back street in Mackinac Island. KCC has a booklet called Perhaps, and I also had 6 photographs in Perhaps, which was the largest number of any of the students. So I had 2 pats on the back while I was going to KCC. I graduated from KCC 25 years after my first graduation from Valparaiso University. I was a teacher in Chicago beginning at the age of 21 and taught in Dayton, Ohio and Chicago. When I was at Western Michigan University, I'll be talking about 6 paintings that I did. This one is called Water and Willows. It's based on photographs that I took in Saugatuck, Michigan. Willows are another one of my favorite motifs. It seems willows and tulips and palms and ferns and autumn and the seasonal changes are things that I love to paint. So this is the Water and Willows. The next one is called Song of Praise. That is from photographs I took in Binder Park Zoo along the nature trail. I don't tend to photograph the animals, I photograph the plants. And that one won an honor at Western Michigan University. This large one, at one point we were told we had to paint some large paintings. And I was driving a Honda Accord, and I liked to paint at home rather than in a studio there. So I measured the back seat of the Honda and stretched 3 canvases just as big as they could, but still fitting in the car. So that's one of the 3, and that's called Epcot, a craft pavilion in Orlando. We went there for a spring vacation one year with the children. Linda chose another one of these large paintings called El Yunque Palms from Puerto Rico. So she chose 2 of the 3 large ones. I had handmade paper making class with Paul Reed at WMU. That was a class that I just loved, working with this soft, pulpy material. We beat it up in beaters and had it in big tubs of pulp that you could work with. And Paul Roberts was so kind. Once he brought his own things from his own studio. He had something like a huge table that had a hole in it so that the excess water could roll off the very pulpy paper. So when he shared that with several of us students, I made a series of 5 similar but different pieces in a Cosmos series. I've always loved starry skies and things of that sort. So this is one of the pieces from the Cosmos series. It's called Plan. To me, it deals with God's thoughts at creation. And so I enjoyed doing that, but I also added a few tiny pieces of collage material to this one. And I believe the other 5 also have little bits of collage. This one is also handmade paper. At that point, I had had a textile class with Eve Reed. She's a WMU teacher, but she actually taught the class at the Art Center of Battle Creek for WMU credit. And I enjoyed weaving, making banners for our church, and also working with her textile materials. So I had some textiles left over from different balls of material that I had worked with. So this handmade paper piece was done at Western, but it has what they call inclusions. That is, it has textiles, it has leftover tidbits of watercolors, and that's how it was done. My husband, Bob, made a number of trips to China on behalf of the Kellogg Foundation. They were funding in China at that time, and I accompanied him on several of these. And as I was there, many of the teachers and preschool children had never really seen an American. And so the teacher was crossing the street with all of the children, and she told them to stop and wave to me. And it was so delightful. They're waving and they're blowing kisses. And the little boy on the far left has the universal symbol of, "Teacher, I have to use the bathroom, and soon, please." So this was so delightful. So I have 4 pieces in this series of the preschool children in China. After graduating from WMU, I have an MA in art, and then I continued on to get a Master of Fine Arts. So now the next pieces that I'll be talking about are pieces that I did after graduation. Obviously, that got to be a fun time in life when I was no longer commuting early in the morning, sometimes on snowy days, and carrying heavy bags to class. So I could experiment and do things as I chose. So the first piece that I'll talk about is called Inroad. It's based on a country road here in Michigan, and I love texture. You can see a lot of texture there. The paint is quite thick. If you were to get up to it and touched it, you would feel that it's thick. And so that's an acrylic on canvas that I enjoyed doing. I have a lot of autumn paintings over a period of time that will be in the show. The next piece, this one's called Seeds for a New Harvest. It's from the Seed Time and Harvest series. That's a very large series of paintings I did, small, medium, large, over a number of years. These were all started out of doors on the patio in summer using hot press paper. Hot press is the smoothest kind of paper you can get. And I used beauty shop bottles, spray bottles, and also bottles to pour paint. If you are to look on the back of many of these paintings, you'll actually see paint on the back, because I would use a piece of plexiglass, put the paper down, spray, and then wiggle it back and forth and let some of that. The leaves and plants are from our own garden. I used 3 major kinds of leaves. Lamb's ear, we started with a small potted plant. Bob's our gardener. He kept growing and growing, so we have all the lamb's ear we could use possibly for the next part of our life. A maple tree is right there on the patio, a small one. And the third major one would be 4 o'clock leaves. These yellow red leaves are from 4 o'clock bushes. In addition, as time went on, I began to use other items. Chrysanthemums for the seeds. And then as you do these paintings, you do that first stage out of doors on the patio. That has to dry completely, and then the leaves will either curl up and you remove them. The maples curl up. The 4 o'clocks usually you have to peel off. And then after that first stage, you use brushes or other materials to finish it, because there might be an area in which I say I do want it greener, or I do want it bluer, and now I get out brushes. And so some of those pieces can be finished indoors. So it's done in stages. And then among the last stages, down in the far corner, you can see little flecks of paint that were either put on with a brush or sometimes with, I have toothbrushes and I flick paint on them. So this is a very large series that I enjoyed working on over a long period of time. There probably are maybe 8 of these in the show, all of this same size, done around the same time. The third piece, sometimes you set a goal for yourself, like a challenge, that you try to achieve a goal. In watercolor, there is something called gradation. Gradation means that if I say, what color are bricks? You don't say, well, they're dark brown or reddish brown. Each brick might be different if you look very closely. So my goal at this one was to have no 2 bricks look alike. These are what I call my patio paintings because they are using natural plant material. These are maple leaves, 4 o'clocks, lamb's ear, impatiens, and the little seeds are from, I'm not sure, but they're from they're from our garden. And so they all were started out of doors. I've used some unique tools here and there. This kind of a technique is from a syringe from my son-in-law's veterinary clinic. It was one of the things suggested by Mary Ann Beckwith, if you can get a hold of a syringe. And the nice thing about that kind of a stroke, it is thin and thick, a little bit unexpected. When you do these paintings, you have to always by hand paint every stem. So even if you get the imprint from the leaves, that work is all done. And obviously then, at a certain point, after the leaf part is dry, you pick up a brush and decide what else the painting needs to make it complete. So here I used a brush, just a regular, watercolor brush with blue paint or aqua paint to fill in, whatever I felt was necessary. These little dots are done with a tiny little brush, flecking like that. I experimented with different plants. These are petunias. And petunias were rather hard to work with because they didn't want to come up. When you're ready to remove them the next day, they wanted to stick. And then I have my favorites again, the maples, the 4 o'clock leaves. These are pine needles from our big pines in the back of the yard. This is from rock salt. These little tiny dots here are from one of my many toothbrushes dipped in red paint. To have things stay on top, you use transparent paint underneath and then opaque paints on top. And so by flecking the toothbrush with the red paint there, I would get these tiny dots. And here I did it with my yellow toothbrush. This is salt, which is put on early, salt or rock salt. When your paper is very wet, it'll make that kind of an impression. Here's the white paint. I always joke that I'm the only one in Battle Creek who has a series of toothbrushes in about 20 different colors. I started using more than one toothbrush because at first I had one toothbrush. Okay, you dip it in the color you want, you fleck it, now you're rinsing it, and you feel like you're wasting a lot of paint. So then you're dipping it in another color, flecking it, wasting a lot of paint. So then I started, let's see if I've got some old toothbrushes, especially the hard toothbrushes rather than the soft ones seem to work well. Every so often you get a painting that's not complete, or they use the nice term unresolved. This corner is unresolved. I have to figure out what to do with it, or maybe it won't work at all. But everything else I like about it. The usual same leaves that I mentioned, the lamb's ear, lots of pine needles in this case, the maple leaves, and lots of flecking here. I love texture, and I always was an acrylic artist, and you can get texture in acrylics quite nicely. You can feel the surface, but I was trying to get the feeling of texture in watercolors, and I found a tool called granulation medium, which when you mix with your paint and water, if you're fortunate, you get this wonderful granulation that's, makes me happy. Sometimes when you have a big piece that doesn't work out completely as a whole, you can do what they call matting it down. So some of my smaller pieces may have started out as being part of a large piece, and then I cut out a specific segment that I liked. Well, now you say, oh, that's great. Not completely, because you still have to finish it as a piece of art. So now you have to decide, does it need something, or does it need anything, rather than just saying, oh, that's great all by itself. So here are some brushwork, and here again is my famous toothbrush flex. And I found that I had a tool from way back called an ear syringe, and it made these nice little circular dots. And then again, the yellow toothbrush. And I use color intuitively. I don't think too much. I don't say, well, I mean, mentally I say, what does it need? Does it need red? Does it need blue? Does it need yellow? Does it need purple? Does it need white? Does it need nothing? So the color is intuitively used. Sometimes you get, because this kind of painting is so intuitive, sometimes you get what I call magic. I don't know how I did that, and I couldn't do it again if I tried. So these are what I call the magic that sometimes happens. Obviously, as I described, not everything turns out well. Sometimes you have to mat it down and take just a segment. Other times you get magic. These are templates. That is, I cut from a plastic sheeting shapes that I wanted to use over and over again, that can be dipped in paint or that can be sprayed around. When you have this kind of thing happening, in traditional watercolor, some people do not like that because it's called a blossom. If the paint is, if the paper is too wet, it'll backflow and make a blossom. But when you're working intuitively like this, some of those blossoms really, I think, are rather nice. Sometimes I even have handmade paper pieces that I use in collage form for a little pathway. And this has a lot of toothbrush work. The yellow flecks, the green flecks, handmade paper, dots with yellow on one of the small brushes, white. In some cases, for traditional watercolor, you're told to leave the white of the paper, and in this case you can use opaque white. And I do use opaque white and enjoy it. This is a little bookmark in which I have the lamb's ear, and in this case I would take the lamb's ear, turn it over, and paint on the back of the lamb's ear, and then press it down to make a print. You can tell I love color, and again use it intuitively. You have all the bright colors here. Here is one that was a print from a lamb's ear again, with different paint on the back of it. Here's toothbrush work. I was telling you about the lamb's ear, in which you can take a lamb's ear and paint on the back of it. And you get varying results. It doesn't always turn out perfectly, but when it does, it makes you happy. And you can paint on the back of it with white or yellow or green or whatever you want. And this is, again, impatience. 4 o'clock leaves. I'm not sure what that leaf is. The leaves are supposed to be soft leaves. If you take a hard leaf like an oak, it won't work. You have to have a soft leaf. In fact, Mary Ann Beckwith used the term, get newborn maple leaves. Just the first of the season are especially nice because they're soft. And sometimes you actually just go boing and you get something you like. Other times I do have one of my brushes here that you can use to scrub things out. There have been times when I've had something happen that I didn't like, and you dip it in water and you scrub it until it goes out, and then maybe paint something on top. Templates, as I mentioned, you cut your own pattern or shape out, and again I've used palms, and there will be a lot of paintings in the show with palms, photography, acrylic, watercolor, and here's a small one that uses that template. To use a template like this, there are two ways, positive and negative. Sometimes you set the template down and you spray around it. Other times you spray first and then dip the template in blue and then make the impression. It takes a lot of scrubbing. Your templates get dirty. I've got a big, huge bucket of water and a scrub brush on the patio, and I'm scrubbing a template each time I use it because it has to be clean for the next time around. This one has some of that magic. And sometimes you're not sure if you want it this way, this way, this way, or this way because it's abstract. What I do is set it on the floor and walk around it, and sometimes then it comes to mind as to which direction you want. This one has a little bit of these crayons, which is an opaque oil-based medium oil pastels. I have 3 boxes of these, in different colors so that I can just grab. And sometimes when I'm working with these, I have a whole pile that I've grabbed in 15 minutes of different colors, and then I have to put them back when I'm all done. So that has this kind of, and then this is the salt again, the rock salt. And this is just from lots of water, probably tipping the paper. And these are those blushes that I mentioned earlier that when the paper is very wet, sometimes you get this backflow of water. I use anything and everything to finally get where I want to. The spray paints, I buy Robert Doak's paints like this, and then you mix them in proportion in water. I usually have the initial sprays of red, yellow, and blue are in large spray bottles, the kind you use in your garden to spray your plants. And then the smaller bottles are from Michael's. And they do get clogged up at times, and you have to soak them in Windex overnight. It's not just, oh, I want a yellow, now it's going to work. It doesn't always. And the other one that I brought along, Oxgall liquid, is not in any of these. But when you want to paint something in a more traditional way, and you have your flowers in the front, and then you want the background to sort of fade to infinity, you mix some of this and the flowers just get very soft in the background. So on these, in addition to the crayons or the oil pastels, I've used acrylics at times, especially for the stems, to get the stems done. The other way I've done many of the stems is with a Sharpie permanent marker, or occasionally you will find some nice pencil work in the pieces. For our church, I have done 5 series of photographs. The first series I ever did was called Growth. We had a new narthex or welcoming area in our church, and the walls were very blank, and we had a decorator who was a member of the congregation, and she said, could I do some photographs for that area? So this first series of photographs, there are 12 in the whole series, it was called Growth. And I think Linda chose 2 or 3 from that series to display. Then another series I did was called Autumn Musings. I believe there probably will be several photographs from that series exhibited also. Then I decided I wanted to do something for Lent, which is the most serious time of the year in the Christian calendar. And I wasn't sure at all what the subject matter would be or if I would be able to do it. And we did have a trip up to Stowbridge in Vermont, and they had like a Greenfield Village type of setup. And there I found everything I needed for the Lenten series. It has the Lenten series, the theme of that is we all have difficulties in our lives, and and just as Lent commemorates the difficulties of Christ, I wanted to somehow carry that over to human beings. And so this is one of the series of 12, and this one is called Blocked. Now, because these photos were largely gray in looks, and I wanted to add hope in the midst of problems, you can use cotton balls and a little bit of oil paint, and very carefully with a medium, a special medium, spread a little bit of purple or a little bit of gold in particular to add hope This photograph has been exhibited in a number of juried shows. It was at the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts. It was at a theological seminary in Evanston, Illinois, and probably at several others. That whole Hard Places series, as it's called, had many pieces that got into juried shows. These three are three of the more unusual pieces I've done. This one is called Starburst. When I was in Washington, D.C. at the National Museum in Smithsonian, they had an exhibit called Our Changing Universe, and I took a number of paintings, and that was great because our church chose the theme Shine Like Stars in the World for their 50th anniversary, and they asked if I would be able to paint a theme painting. So that's my theme painting. I actually ended up doing two paintings that are similar. This one got into the statewide competition here at the Arts Center a few years ago. It's somewhat different than my other pieces. This one is probably the most abstract avant-garde piece in the entire exhibit. After Mary Ann Beckwith came and led us on a workshop of all sorts of creative techniques, I actually learned about the spraying techniques in her class. But she asked us to do something abstract, and I had never been quite that bold before, but I went ahead and did it. And I used some of my templates. You can see some palms and some of the other plants, and yet some very wet areas that were sort of a new creative venture for me. The third piece was in the statewide competition here at the Arts Center probably 2 years ago. And it's an underwater scene, but I took it at an aquarium in San Francisco. It was interesting because some people thought maybe I was an underwater diver. Now, I do have a daughter-in-law and a grandson that do go on underwater dives, but I'm even a poor swimmer, so there was no way that this was done underwater. So it was taken in an aquarium. But anyhow, it did make it into a competition.
AccessVision, your voice, your community.